Stephen, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. You've grew up in Ireland and you've always been a little bit of a social media entrepreneur, I think. So it would be great to hear your story.
Yeah. Well, I suppose, first of all, thanks for having me, Steve. Really appreciate it. My story was kind of always social media linked to a certain extent. I had an unconventional way into business. I was in uni for 6 months and just it wasn't for me, so I dropped out. And I was fortunate enough to go and work directly in an agency and development house. So that was a really important learning curve for me. Very much a general dog's body when you don't go to university and you go straight into the business world. But I got really powerful exposure into how they operated as a company. They were an agency where they ran marketing, specifically email marketing for large businesses, such as Tesco and VHI, which is a healthcare provider, and other large telcos like O2 and Vodafone. So that was one segment of the business that purely marketing led. But expensive campaigns, expensive retainers. And the other side of that company, which was very fascinating for my journey, was they helped startups start up. So they had developers and entrepreneurs would come to them with ideas and they would build the software. And what was unique about them was they didn't just build the software to the spec the entrepreneur asked. The agency would actually do the market research, validate if there's any competition in the market, etc. So it was quite consultative as an approach. And I did that for probably 4 or 5 years, went in, basic level, as I said, was doing data entry into Excel spreadsheets back then. I think this is 16, 17 years ago at this stage. And I worked my way up to project management, where I was leading development of cross-platform projects, iOS, Android at the time, and then web and mobile applications as well. So great learning curve. Then the entrepreneur in me kind of kicked in and I started to have my own ideas. And I had an idea that I was working on that was a social media network in essence. It enabled you to kind of organize events with your friends. At the time, there was a very notable trend where the unbundling of Facebook was happening, where you had Facebook was doing a lot and you had specific apps that were being bundled out. So an example of that would be you were able to share photos on Facebook, videos, etc. But then Instagram became just a photo app to share with your friends. WhatsApp became just a messenger. So I tried to do it for events, basically. And at the time, I was fortunate enough to meet some corporate finance people and angel investors, and they decided to invest ultimately in the company and the idea that I had. I ran that for kind of 2-3 years. It was, as my family would say, the most expensive degree you could possibly get. Ultimately, it failed, but I learned a lot from it. And the big takeaway for me, and I'm sure we'll get into kind of the socio-local element to it, was we were trying to monetize the platform. We saw a lot of people organizing events with their friends and would attach a restaurant to it, or a bowling alley, for example. So I went to meet with 50 plus SME owners, kind of mom and pop businesses in Ireland, Dublin specifically. And I try and ask them, well, would you pay to be listed on our platform? And they all basically said, no, we have open table. We have other ways of doing this. And the conversation 90% of the time dovetailed to, but we've got this major problem in terms of running and managing our social media.
Yeah.
And for me, that was really interesting coming from the agency world and knowing traditionally paying for agencies are expensive. Because they typically go after big brands, big companies. And I thought there'd be an opportunity to launch a business that would focus on solving that specific problem for smaller retailers and smaller businesses and helping them with social media.
And was it more than just a resource problem?
It was a resource problem. So time constraints primarily for these businesses. You have like mom and pop, or even if they're company operated, it is, you've a lot to do. If you're managing a store or you're the owner of a store, specifically in grocery, you have to make sure the shelves are stocked, you're rostering properly, the works. So it was a time thing, but it was a confidence thing then as well. This was a new media channel that they weren't used to. And the demographic of a lot of the owners of these businesses or store managers didn't play into the early adopters of social media networks. So yeah, it would have been a combination of those two factors.
And so what was the idea that then gave birth to SocioLocal?
Yeah, it was my old agency background, and the conversations that I had was I knew there was an opportunity somewhere to build a software to automate as much of that as you possibly can for the SME or the small business. To avoid past mistakes, what we decided to do was, rather than speculate in the software we thought we needed to build, how about we become an agency and we offer streamlined marketing services where a retailer or a small business would pay monthly, anywhere from £150 all the way up to, you know, 400 or 500 for the larger packages. And that would cover everything. And the reason we wanted to do that was to generate revenue from day dot, but understand and learn from the retailers and the small businesses, so we knew exactly what software we were building when it came to building that software. So we launched that in January 2017, and over the first couple of years we scaled that to 600 small businesses in Ireland, the UK and New York, and that was a really valuable thing for us to learn. So when we get into SocioLocal, who more so now facilitate multi-location retailers, bigger brands with hundreds or thousands of locations, our entry into that was actually looking after the small guy, the individual store. And I think that was a very important part of our journey, to understand how important they are in the ecosystem. And also, by focusing on solving their problem, we actually give a lot more value to the head office or the corporate when it comes to, you know, a symbol group or a big franchise network.
Okay, so what is the proposition that SocioLocal offer?
Yeah. So I think to step back and talk about our conventional customers, you know, multi-location retailers, we would consider people that have kind of 50 or 100 plus sites. And typically within there, you have a head office marketing team or the brand marketing team. And then you've got the local retailers. And there's two different types of local retailers. There's the independents, where they are a fascia or a symbol group or a franchise. And then you've got company owned. What you always see is the marketing team spend a lot of money and a lot of effort building amazing marketing materials for multiple channels, you know, TV, radio, in-store, print, social media. And there's a lot of conflict when it comes to trying to get those assets down to those local social media pages. Okay. And they were trying to do that with conventional methods of, you know, sharing it in Dropbox, emailing it down to the store and asking them to post it. And on the flip side, you've got the store. You know, as we just mentioned, they're not overly confident in social media, don't know how to manage it. They've got time constraints. And ultimately what our software does is plug that gap. So we unify the local stores, their local social media pages. We give head office access to that. And we allow head office to distribute those assets out that they're putting together down to those local store pages. And for the stores, we use AI to help them automate more authentic local social media posts, which is really important for the hygiene of a local social media page, that it doesn't become overly brand heavy.
But isn't it the case that certainly all of the retailers that I've ever worked with would have central social media teams, but they would not have pages, or it's unusual if they would have pages or sites on a store level? It's all...
Yeah, it is. And it's a combination of both we've seen. So there's been some early adopters of it where they would pioneer having local pages. And then you've got the other retailers that are, say, we're brand only, we're going to have a national page. And when you actually start to unpack that and ask them questions about, well, why only that strategy? Because there's an untapped resource here through your store network. A lot of those decisions were actually taken when tools didn't exist to manage local pages. Mm-hmm. So by default, they ended up making this decision to get rid of local pages or not having them at all. Mm-hmm. And obviously that leads to not being able to tap into a really valuable marketing asset through these local pages. So combination of both. But over the years now, what we're seeing with our software and others alike is more and more retailers are now turning towards activating these local pages, because they've realized the importance of them.
What is the advantage of activating local pages versus just managing your social media nationally, as most people do?
Yeah, I think going back to the day of general retail, and even when I was growing up, you know, social media didn't exist. And even when I go to the store today, I know my local store manager. I know the people that work in this store, I chat to them. So these stores are really powerful networks within the locality of where they're based. And I think retailers now have really wanted to tap into that. And by doing so, these local pages, when they're activated, start to actually dwarf the impressions and the reach that the brand pages are getting. And to give some really basic examples of that, we work with a retailer who only started their local pages last year. Those local pages now have more fans and followers than their national brand page. Their impressions are 3 times higher than what their national brand page is getting a year. So the actual ROAS and, you know, the return on ad spend and their marketing assets through these local pages is far higher than what they're getting through their national brand pages.
And why is that?
There's a couple of factors. I think when you make the decision to follow a local store that you live near, naturally there's more affinity to that store. You're following that because you want to see specific updates about what that store is doing, whether that is promotional offers in terms of, you know, what are they running, what discounts are they offering at this time, any new service announcements. You know, you see in the grocery sector now, there's a lot of other offerings in store like Amazon lockers, etc. But with the national brand page, you know, it's not the same. It's a bit different. They serve 2 different purposes, and consumers follow those 2 different pages for different reasons. So when the head office or the brand marketing team is running ads through these local pages, they're reaching shoppers near and around that store. And what we see specifically is the engagements on those local pages are 5 times that of a national brand page, which shows how powerful these local pages are. And there's 2 sides to it. There's organic, pushing content out organically, which is unpaid. And then there's the paid side. And in short, the paid side means that the brand or head office in these wholesalers or retailers are able to buy audiences for a fraction of the cost as to what they would typically be buying it for through the national page. And the reason behind that is it's actually quite logical when you talk it through. When you're buying, if you want to run a campaign for, 2-for-1 Coca-Cola, for example, nationally, and you've got $100,000 marketing budget to do that in social, you are buying a large audience across a large geographical body. But if you take that same $100,000 and you've got 1,000 stores with 1,000 Facebook and Instagram pages, now we cover more networks than just those 2, but just for example's sake, you are taking that 100,000 and you're splitting it up into 1,000 what we call micro audiences. And those audiences are now being purchased through the stores pages. And what that is doing is you're buying a much smaller audience through an SME page, and it's actually reducing the CPM cost typically by 40%, and the CPR, so cost per result, by up to 80%.
Gosh, so if I understand what you're saying correctly, I think you're saying that very few multi-location retailers today manage local store social media sites. It's all done from the head office on behalf of all of the stores. But I think what you're saying is when they enable local pages, then the engagement scores, did you say are like 5 times greater? And then the aggregate of each store creates an audience, a followership, a set of engagement metrics that are dramatically bigger than can be achieved at the head office level. Is that?
Exactly. And so impressions wise, these local pages per 100 locations, because obviously you've got retailers of various sizes, but per 100 locations, they are typically 4x the impression count versus the national brand page annually.
4 times.
Yeah, and 5x from an engagement perspective.
Okay. And then I think what you said was you can then buy an audience on behalf of each or via each local site, and the impact of that is, or the cost of that is, did you say 40% of what you would pay nationally? So
on average, yeah. So
okay.
40% on average, that is CPM, so cost to reach 1,000 people. And we see that across the board. And I'm not talking, a small number of campaigns. This is millions in spend that's been funneled through brand pages and local pages. It does change based on, campaign types, objectives. An example of that would be alcohol would typically become a little bit more expensive because naturally you have to have an narrower audience because of the age range. But the savings are significant, so much so that we see some of our customers that used to spend 100% of their social media budget on national, 50% now being diverted to local. And that's just the marketing metrics that stack that up. There's other benefits to get out of this. You know, we always do case studies on sales impacts for stores. And we validated that the promoted products that get ad spend, in some cases, they've seen a 60% sales surge versus control groups on period over period, and organic up to 29% increase. So
if these results are so spectacularly good, I get much higher engagement and then I can get an audience at much, much lower cost. Why isn't everybody doing this? Why do people still run their multi-location social media, as most retailers do, centrally?
Yeah, I think it boils down to two things. I think since we began this journey kind of pure multi-location kind of 4 or 5 years ago, we've seen a massive shift now to people moving back towards it. And I think more wholesalers and retailers are coming around to the idea of doing this. And I think that actually aligns quite well with some people doing it really successfully. And some of the things you see in the market at the moment, you know, Walmart announcing how much they value local social media pages. And obviously a lot of retailers around the world will look towards them to see what they're doing. You then see the likes of Unilever talking about a lot of their social media budget, I think 4.5 billion now annually going to influencers and creators. And when you get back to it, in essence, these local pages are influencers, you know, in that local community that they operate in. But the value add that they also have on top of that is they're not just local influencers, they're actually the shop where people go and buy. And I think whilst it's taken a while, I think now the tools are in place to make this simple. And for wholesalers and retailers alike, through no fault of their own, tools like ours didn't exist, you know, 5, 6, 7 years ago when these decisions were made. And I think we're now starting to see people come around to that. And some businesses are doing amazing jobs with these local social media pages. You know, we don't work with them, but I believe Currys give access to their local stores to create that authentic local content. And we see it with some of our customers that when you give some autonomy to a store that can operate these brand guardrails, they get posts that go viral within their community. I won't name the store specifically, but it was a Spar store based out of Scotland. And, you know, they've had some posts that have gone viral, reaching, you know, 250K, 300 people. And these are small convenience stores. And all it takes is enabling a local manager to be able to actually create that authentic content and having the confidence to do so. And where that's...
Wouldn't that be a nightmare for a brand conscious social media manager at head office? The thought that stores would be posting their own content.
Yeah, historically, it would have been. But through our products, it's possible now with the guardrails that we're able to introduce to make sure that these posts are on brand. They're not too tongue-in-cheek, I suppose, for lack of a better word. And that's what we're trying to empower, because we have to remember that the essence of social media and social media started by authenticity. You know, it started by seeing an authentic post from your friend or family member or video. And it's important that these stores maintain that at a certain level. And it's not just about maintaining that because of the power of it, but the algorithms love this. So if you can enable a store manager to, you know, promote the latest discounts and do something silly in the process of doing that in the video, when the brand starts to drop in their own content or the retailer, whether it's a part of their MP promotional cycle, because of the work the store managers are doing, now the content dropped in by the retailer for the promotional cycle will reach more people and go that bit further. So both work. And I think it's important for me to mention our software works for both. You don't have to enable local store managers. We try and advocate for it because it's really powerful. But our software can be used in unison by just head office enabling these local pages.
Interesting. Now, social media today plays a big role in the world of retail media. But but it must be the case that your proposition also enables itself to retail media. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been quite an exciting, I suppose, 12 months for us on the retail media side of things. We've probably been aware of retail media for 3-4 years, going back to one of our earlier customers talking about, can they sell this space to a brand? And we were just so busy building the nuts and bolts of our current product that we didn't look at it in much detail. And we had a couple of instances around 12 months ago that kind of acted as a catalyst for us to really look at retail media. And we realized that we had built the perfect architecture for managing, hundreds of locations or thousands, and then thousands of social media pages on top of that. So we actually had the perfect foundations to build our retail media product, which we launched earlier this year, which is basically the operating system that sits on top of these local social media pages, where it turns them into sellable inventory. Much like other traditional retail media methods are packaged up and sold to brands by retailers. And ultimately, what it allows our customers to do is turn our software, through our software, turn their stores and their social media networks into an offsite or extension of in-store new retail media channel that they can package up and sell to the brands. And where it's been really valuable is there's a real nice value chain that goes with that. The retailers unlocking a new revenue stream. And for us, it's important that that can be as incremental as it possibly can be, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But the store itself is also getting brand-funded campaigns down to their store with products they stock, and typically ad spend flowing behind that, covered by the brand, which is obviously extending the reach of that store, their impression count within their community. The brand is getting access to these cheaper CPMs, better roasts that I've mentioned, for obviously a fraction of what they would have traditionally paid. But there's a very important thing behind it as well, is for one of the first times ever through social, brands are able to actually reach local shoppers near a store through the voice of that local retailer, not through a national brand. So I know if my local Spar or Londa store or whoever it happens to be is running the campaign, I'm seeing that from, in my case, Spar Fulford. My store where I know the store manager, and I'm seeing that campaign come through the voice of my local retailer, which is invaluable for a brand and something that they haven't typically been able to tap into.
And so are you able to talk about some of the results that you're seeing?
Yeah, I think what we've been fortunate to be able to do is we've got a large network of customers where this is our retail media product is, I suppose, exposed to or could be exposed to. We work with a number of wholesalers across the UK and Ireland and wider Europe, with brands like fascias like Spar, Eurospar, Mace, Londis, Super Value back in Ireland. So we've got a great network specifically in grocery that we can show this software to and share it with them. And what we've seen in the first 6 months, a couple of things that were really important were making sure this is incremental. And we launched not too long ago with the wholesaler, who have a couple of hundred stores. And in the first 6-7 weeks, they'd already sold to 10 suppliers. And the most valuable thing behind that for us was we were told that a number of those suppliers had never spent with them before in any sort of media way. And for us, that was, I suppose, validation for us and validation for them that this is an incremental channel. And it was across not just the big guys, the Unilevers, the Heinekens, the Mondelez. You would see more local suppliers as well, because this was an affordable channel for them to access. But also newer suppliers are, I'm not going to say more tuned into social, but they probably put more emphasis of it because it's cheaper for them than traditional TV, radio, etc. So our customers have seen success with selling it, which has been brilliant and great to see. And then on the flip side of that, the campaign metrics are staying consistent. Those CPMs are much cheaper than what we'll see versus national campaigns. So national on Meta specifically, you'll see anywhere from £3 to all the way up to £7 for CPM costs. We're typically seeing floating around the pound or all the way down to kind of 50p, depending on the campaign.
Wow. So that's,
It's significantly more cost effective.
6 to 8 times cheaper.
Exactly. And for us, our big emphasis now is, well, let's look at the sales data on top of that. So we'll work with our retail partners to, at this stage, we do more hands-on analysis, but we can integrate into their data lake. And we've seen some really exciting campaigns where sales have increased by, I mentioned earlier, 29% in some cases. We've done kind of split tests as well, where we ran campaigns versus in-store. So you had a control group that was running in-store. You had another group which was getting our spend, and then you had another group that was getting nothing. So that was the control group, I should say. And year over year, funnily enough, the sales actually decreased for the in-store retail media. They decreased by, I think it was 12%, but they stayed flat for the stores that were actually getting our campaigns through our software, through the local social media pages. Now, I'm probably not doing a good job at selling myself there, but we live in a world today where we all want more sales. But when you look at year over year, the key distinction for us there was, if those stores that didn't get our campaigns through the local social media pages, they would have ended up like the stores that were only getting in store. So sales would have still dropped. We saved some sales going through our network. And obviously there's balances and splits. And I think what we're looking to do now is, how do we fit into the whole retail media ecosystem, which I think is important. And we want to learn from our customers and work with them on how can they take our component and package that up as a part of their existing retail media offering, to make it just that bit more compelling. I
know that you mentioned earlier Unilever, and I was reading that I think Unilever have said publicly that 50% of their total advertising is going on social. So it's presumably got to be the case that anything that expands the retailer's ability to monetize social media, almost by definition, has got to be a good thing.
Absolutely. And I think that was a bit of a smoking gun moment, I think, in the industry, when you see Unilever saying this. They're obviously not making this decision on a whim. I think they went from 20% to 50% or 30% to 50%. So when they speak about it, when you read the press release, it's very data backed. And I think they've gone from, if my numbers are right, anywhere from 40,000 global influencers, trying to increase that to 300,000. And I think that's a big statement from a very big brand. And I think what we want to do is put our customers and other retailers in the position to be able to capitalize on that new spend or that new budget reallocation.
So what would your advice be to a retail media network operator that wants to capture a higher percentage of overall brand retail social media advertising spend, but I guess they also have to be mindful that they want to enable the brands to grow as well? What would your advice be to those retail media networks?
I think it would be evaluate your social media position at a local level. Now, I'm very biased in this, but the reason I say that is the results are there. They're proven. It's now being backed up by Unilever and these other large brands that are kind of saying this and reallocating their ad spend. And one example, we were at a conference recently where we met a couple of suppliers, and they're stocked by some of the largest supermarkets in the UK. And they're going out and they're running ads trying to geo-target where the stores are based themselves. And they're spending a lot on this, but the CPMs they're getting are at that £3 to £7 mark. And these are suppliers that aren't as big as Unilever, but telling us that they would reallocate that internal marketing budget to the retailers. So I suppose, in short, to a retail media team, I would say they need to look at their social media space. I would say they need to audit. Do they have local pages? Do they not have local pages? You'd be amazed about the amount of retailers that actually have local pages and they're not aware of this. not just company owned. Obviously, all franchise and independent timber groups, typically their independents will have a large number of pages. But audit that first and foremost. And I would then say they need to start to really consider this as a new retail media channel. And not just because of some of the stats that we've spoken about here today, but how easy it is to activate it. You know, this is very much a turnkey retail media solution. Data integration, yes, can get more complex as it goes, but to start it off, it is quite fast.
That's a good point, actually, you make, because just thinking about it, one of the big challenges that many retail media networks face is the constant innovation in ad tech and in orchestration software and in-store screens, and all of these solutions do require quite heavy integration, the involvement of the parent company's IT team, for example. But presumably here, is there any integration at all?
So we have our native integrations to all the social media networks. So it's not just Meta, it's Google My Business, which is an overlooked asset for a lot of retailers. TikTok, LinkedIn, X are the main ones that we focus on. We do direct integrations when it's possible. So we can go into sales data. We can go in and look at kind of store setup. And what I mean by that is what items they stock, what services they offer, so we can get more dynamic with the content that's distributed in a more automated way. But integrations to start off are extremely light. It is a case of we get the pages connected. If they don't have them, we help them create those pages. And they're off and running. And then we get more detailed and complex as we go. And I think you mentioned something interesting there about, in-store screens, for example, or radio, where there can be a large capital outlay to get the network set up and a large maintenance side of things to keep that network up and running and active and live. And not to overlook, a lot of retail companies are still doing print. Like there's still a lot of money from retail media going towards print in a lot of our customers. And for us, what's really powerful is it's turnkey. It's typically 100% compliant. So you're not having to go back to the brands to prove compliance. We can prove it almost immediately and the metrics that go with it. And it's a lot more affordable and the profit margins are far higher. Now, not against in-store and things like that. They net off over time after the capital outlay. But for print, for an example, if you have budget going towards print and retail media, the net profit margins through any digital channel is typically far superior to that. So kind of the three things I'm looking at there is it's turnkey, it's cheaper to activate, and the net profit is typically higher than some conventional methods that might still be at play.
So it sounds like you've developed a solution that's right time, right place. In a market like the UK, and thinking about kind of grocery in the UK, and you've mentioned a number of the social media platforms. Are they? What are the big trends that you're seeing between those different networks?
Yeah, so we analyze this all the time. I think we have 18,000 plus retailers now using the software, and we always analyze the data. Facebook is still the leader, particularly in convenience. In some verticals, you will get Instagram. And that would be more some bespoke franchise customers that we work with. But Facebook ultimately is leading the way. You would typically see that anywhere from 50 to 70% of those stores that have Facebook pages have an Instagram page. 100% typically of Google My Business because it's how people find them. And then what we're seeing now is TikTok is massively on the rise. And so much so that some of our customers are actually creating TikTok pages for every single one of their stores as we speak. And the importance behind that is new network, different audience that they can tap into, but it also makes content they're already putting together go further. And once it's activated, it's an asset, it sits there, and it's much easier than some of those other kind of things that we spoke about. So Facebook, Instagram, Google My Business are, matured, I would say, to a certain extent. With TikTok kind of taking off like a rocket in terms of what we're seeing at the moment. And, I could get into kind of CPC costs, impressions per network, but they kind of balance out. The frustrating thing about Google is it's quite difficult to get actually campaign metrics back. So you're very much more reliant on what's called profile views or visits. So you have to look at, okay, well, what influence do we have on how many views the profile got, how many people clicked to get directions, for example. But that'd be kind of what we see across the landscape. And thankfully for us, we're seeing a lot more of partners that we work with divert a lot more of their social budget towards local, which is quite powerful.
And you were saying, I think you said earlier, before the podcast, that you obviously you start off in Ireland, but you've got about 80% of the independent stores in Ireland covered. You've now been a year or so in the UK market, but it would feel to me like this is a global opportunity. And how are you thinking about where does the company go from here?
Yeah, and it's a great question. So my role specifically in the company is I try and stay tuned into product as much as I can, but ultimately it's led by my co-founder Michael and our CTO Paul. So I kind of own the commercial side of things, and I'm always trying to figure out, well, how can we grow faster? We have been quite successful in the UK and Ireland. Now it took a long time to prove things out. And that was ultimately very much a biz dev route that we took. It was outbound sales, building a network, and I suppose respect to an extent within the industry where people knew our brand. Now what we're looking at doing is putting specific partnerships in place that will open up more territories to us around the world. We've had some successful ones, that I can mention. We're partners now with Spar International. We have been for a year. When that partnership started, we worked with 3 wholesalers. We're now working with 7 across, I think it's 7 across 6, 7 fascias as well, on top of Spar, because typically you'll get a wholesaler and they have multiple. And that's opened us up to bigger geographies where we speak. We have customers in Central Europe now through Spar. Through other partnerships we have, we're now looking at some African customers as well. And that's quite exciting for us. So to answer your question, it's a blend of outbound, but now looking to leverage a partner ecosystem and a partner network that we can lean into. And less of just a general channel partner. We're not looking for partners that are just social media resellers. We want partners that are really clued into the retail ecosystem, that are hands-on with retailers and wholesalers at a senior level as well. And more now, we are leaning into the retail media side of that, where we're finding that retail media companies have really powerful and strong connections with retailers and wholesalers alike. And they can be really powerful partners for us, and likewise, we'd hope us for them. So that's quite exciting. And other customers we work with are taking us into different channels. And the example of one customer we'd work with would be Just Eat, which wouldn't be our conventional customer. They don't own any physical outlets themselves, but they power a lot of them, and they power delivery for a lot of them. So that's been quite an exciting journey for us, working with Just Eat in the UK primarily, now launching UK and Ireland. And then hopefully one day it will expand beyond the shores of UK and Ireland as well. So
I can imagine also then this proposition works beyond just retail, but to any kind of multi-location, multi-site business.
Exactly. And, I think there's so much opportunity in this space, which I don't think I need to tell you about retail media. But any company that is integrated or works with hundreds or thousands of locations, we can work with in a certain way. Now, obviously there's a balance there. First and foremost, if we can work direct with a wholesaler that carries the symbol, that is our preference. But there's other options out there where they can work together as well. So you might have, let's say, a POS supplier working with a wholesaler, and the POS provider might offer a coupon redemption in store. So naturally, there's a good unison there between all 3 parties where we could work together for specific campaigns, and you can pull in brands obviously to kind of leverage what the POS is offering in terms of the attribution side of things. So there's different ways of working, and I think there's a lot of untapped potential, not just in the UK, I think globally. In the unaffiliated space, I think that's prominent and there's a lot there. And I think unlocking specific budgets for retailers and stores, I think, is something that the industry is still struggling with a little bit. And I say that with my, I would call relatively crash course in retail media over 12 months. But a big problem we see is, when you work with wholesalers, retailers, they typically have direct relationships with brands. So they're tapping into that trade marketing budget, test and learn budgets. But I think we all know people want to access media spend or agency budgets. And I think what I'd hope to see is it doesn't have to be one or the other if you're a wholesaler or a retailer. I'd love to be able to work with our customers to get them into a position where they can actually tap into agency spend, right, that they're not getting today. And I think both can work together. And I think there's a method in doing that. And that's where we'd be kind of looking to push things as much as we possibly can over the next couple of years. So in regards to opportunity, I think it's massive. We'll continue to kind of innovate, try stay ahead, go deeper into AI. We're doing some incredible things there at the moment that we're launching in the next couple of weeks. So we're quite excited about the journey and kind of what lies ahead.
It sounds like you're going to be very, very busy, and but it also sounds like you've got something that's fairly unique, I think, and it does sound like a very, very exciting proposition for retailers and the brands that they sell. So, Stephen, thanks so much for coming on the show. It's been really interesting learning about Socio Local.
Brilliant. Thanks for having me, Steve.
Yep. Thank you.